Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.
Ready to become better than most people at most things? Welcome to the Pat Flynn Show. Best-selling author, entrepreneur, fitness expert, and philosopher Pat Flynn teaches you how to learn and become amazing at almost everything through the concept of generalism, acquiring and stacking skills that will help you dominate in business and life. Want to get in shape? Write a book? Be a better precog division officer? Or simply launch a successful business empire? Well, sit back, relax, and listen as Pat and his guests offer digestible and entertaining insights on how to learn the skills, tactics, and strategies you need to pursue your goals and achieve the life you've always wanted.
Hey, everyone. Welcome back to Sunday School. This is your host, Pat Flynn. I have a very special guest today. She has actually been on my show before, but in a different capacity. And she is indeed one of the most highly requested guests. And it is none other than my darling, beautiful wife, Christine. Welcome finally back to the Pat Flynn Show.
Thank you so much for having me, dear husband.
So it's the 4th of July, and we were just hanging out, kind of bored, and like, hey, why don't we go do a podcast and make it a Sunday school podcast, because I'm not the only one who had a conversion experience in this family, and our paths were slightly different. We both had our own obstacles in spirituality and faith and into Christianity in particular. So I wanted to bring you on and get your perspective and your story, because I know, we've shared it with a lot of people, and people really resonate with everybody's approach is different. So it's good to share different angles and the things that kind of moved you and your spirit and all these things. So I'm trying to think, where do we even begin? Maybe with a sip of wine.
Oh, yeah. Well, enjoy that.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not drinking wine. I'm drinking beer.
We'll start with what we're drinking. So I am drinking a Pinot from Sonoma County. It's pretty good. We just grabbed it at the Total Wine down here. I'm a total sucker when it comes to label buying. It said award winning. I'm like, must be good.
You know what though? I used to work when I was working in a coffee shop. I worked with a guy who was also a bartender, and he said that if you go based on label, you're not going to get a bad wine necessarily. You'll probably be okay, but you may miss really good wines if you go only by the label. So label shopping isn't bad. You just might miss some good gems that you would normally get because the label wasn't sexy enough for you.
I'm trying to think if that's true. If I've ever bought a wine based on label I didn't like. I mean, I must have at some point.
It's a general rule. I mean, it's not going to, of course you would go there. Okay. I am drinking, since you didn't ask, but I'm drinking an IPA from Lakefront Brewery, which is in Milwaukee, one of my favorites, along with Bell's Two Hearted from Michigan, which I've not been to the brewery, but the Lakefront Brewery is a lot of fun, and I do enjoy this brew.
Yeah, if you're ever in the Milwaukee area, I love Milwaukee. There's a ton to do, lots of good food, good places to drink.
And it's accessible. It's not too big.
It's accessible. You can get in, you can get out fairly easily. Wisconsin, good state.
John Steinbeck loved it.
That's right. He did, didn't he?
He did. I was a little skeptical about the Midwest. And then John Steinbeck's, I'm an East Coast elitist, I guess. But John Steinbeck is one of my favorite writers. And in his book, Travels with Charlie, he said how beautiful, the most beautiful state was Wisconsin. And it was magical and quite unexpected that he would even think that. So it made me a little less resistant.
Prejudice.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's a dirty word, but okay.
Yeah. Well, let's be straight here. Wisconsin wasn't the only thing you held prejudice against. You also held prejudice against a little something called Christianity, perhaps. I was going to say something worse.
I was waiting for that. I was like, oh my God, what am I prejudiced against?
I think this is a good segue. So for people who are unfamiliar, there was a point in your life where you, maybe you should tell the story. I remember of
my
what
childhood.
You said. Well, there was a point in your life where you swore to me that you would never, ever.
Oh, yes,
Christian,
true.
Right?
And you say that like that's a point in my life, like it was very long ago. It wasn't so long ago.
That's right.
We were going for a walk, Pat and I, if you recall, and you had been saying like, oh, let's join the church. And I was like, why? Why would we do this thing that sounds ridiculous? It's for people of lesser intellect that just can have faith. Those lucky people who can just believe in something that they can't ever see. It must be so easy for those people. And I said, fine, I will go to a church with you, but I swear I will. There's no way in hell. I think I said, there's no way in hell that I'm going to ever be a Christian. I will never. Oh no, that's not what I do. I said I will never accept Jesus Christ as my personal Lord and Savior, and I said it with a lot of sarcasm. And then it was like 2 weeks later that I converted, I think.
And now here we are.
And here we are,
wearing the cross necklace.
I am wearing a cross. I gotta say,
very pretty.
Thank you. The first time I wear a crucifix, and the first time I put it on, it couldn't have felt heavier on my skin. I remember walking into the office I was working at the time, and I just felt like I had this giant neon sign pointing down. it was the same as when my first Ash Wednesday, because the ashes, they go on your forehead and they really smell like something. You can feel the little sprinkles on your forehead for quite a while during that day.
Now hold on, because Christianity wasn't the only thing you were prejudiced against.
Oh no, what else?
You also had a prejudice against a little something called Catholicism.
Yes, because I was raised. How
many turns you've made?
I know.
Now you like the Midwest. You're Catholic.
What's happening to me? I am just fulfilling my true self, but God just set me on a very windy, curvy path to get there. Let's just say that. And I did grow up. My whole family is Catholic. The fringes of my family, the cousins, the aunts, the uncles, the grandparents are all Catholic. And I saw, my dad was raised in a very strict household, got beaten up by a lot of nuns when he was a kid. He's on the older side. So this was before Vatican II that he was experiencing a lot of Catholicism. And it was very strict, my way or the highway. And he's a jokester. So, he'd get his knuckles rapped by a ruler quite often. So he had this feeling, and it was very strict. I mean, he didn't curse until he was in his 20s. Oh, wow. So he didn't drink until he was 20. Like, he was just, this is back in he technically was of drinking age in the 60s, yet he didn't even drink until in the 70s. So he was just raised in a very strict household. And so I think when he realized that there was an alternative, he got as far away from all of this as he could. I mean, he still holds the morals. He's still a very moral person, but he just, as far as the belief, he figured that he could do it without the structure. Yeah, which really did him wrong in a lot of ways.
Well, we'll send him the podcast when it's done. Because this episode, what we really want to get into is tools to help people, aside this podcast, of course, and your podcast, which we will mention at the end, the tools to help people better understand, explain, and defend the Christian faith. And I guess the reason we wanted to have this chat is so that you could share some of the things that really helped you along the way.
Yeah.
So you started out with every reason to not become a Christian, and you obviously did. And then even once you made the move to Christianity in general, you were still adamantly opposed.
Yes, because you said, let's try out a few different churches. Let's try a couple different things. And I made my list, and you're like, well, I'd like to try a Catholic church out sometimes. Like, that's the last one we'll be going to. Thank you. Because I thought I knew it. I grew up with going, to church. I think my aunt took me to a Christmas Eve mass once because she wanted me to see how beautiful it was. I was only 7. I saw the candles. It was pretty. I didn't understand it. No, there was no context behind it. And then otherwise it would be me going to church with a friend of mine who would have me over for a slumber party. I would go with her family. Mm-hmm. And mostly it was me getting yelled at by her mom, or hissed at, I should say, in church, because you have the church hiss. Church kids.
I know the church hiss.
Yes, yes, as parents now, we all know the church hiss.
I give the church hiss.
Yes, yes, so do I. I am very good. I just have to juggle 3 kids. So what I thought I knew of Catholicism was this. It seemed dull, dry. Yeah, I really
meaningless, boring.
Yeah, it seemed like it just seemed like a lot of pomp and circumstance. Mm-hmm. Why make such a big deal out of this part? Mm-hmm. Shouldn't you just go and live it all the time? And I didn't know what the Eucharist was, why this was such a big deal. And yes, you are, there is a solemnity. Is that the right word? How do I say that? Solemnity?
Perhaps, yeah.
Yeah, okay. To the Mass, that there's a reason for that, but it doesn't stop there. You do go out and live it.
Yeah.
And you should be a joyful loud and joyful, proud Catholic.
Yes.
Not the lukewarm, we only go to church because just in case Catholic.
We had this conversation with friends over the weekend, and she was saying, one of our friends, that, you know, she tried to go to mass and she didn't feel it either. And then, you know, we had a conversation for a while, and, you know, she admitted that she just really didn't know what's going on.
She's a cradle Catholic.
A cradle Catholic, didn't understand what's going on. And I think that this is the case for, I think a lot of Catholics need to actually be evangelized as much as the non-Catholics. Same thing, you know, the first time, you know, I went to mass, and for many years, even as a kid, before my family fell away from it, I had no idea what was going on. And you can't find meaning without understanding.
Right.
So if you don't understand it, you're not going to find the meaning of it. But then after I talked to this friend of ours for a while and started to explain some things, you know, her ears started to perk up. She started to become kind of exciting. She said, oh, that makes sense. You know, so, you know, they say that the mass is really just the Bible acted out in certain ways. So we can get into that as we move on. I think there's a lot of misconceptions about the mass. Not only do people not understand it, but I think they have the wrong expectations of what it's about or what they're supposed to get out of it rather than what they're supposed to bring to it.
Yeah. And, you know, the sister who runs the RCIA, Rites of Christian Initiation for Adults.
That's right.
Got the acronym right? Okay. So the nun who runs the RCIA at our parish said to us that the Catholic Church historically does a really good job with teaching the youth, not so good about teaching the adults, but at the same time, you know, they get the kids ready for their, you know, first Holy Communion, their confirmation. They're still pretty young. I mean, you know, when I learned sex education in public school, that was in 5th grade. I was 10. What I remember of that, I mean, it doesn't sink in until maybe, you know, that would have been better if it was ongoing, I suppose, if that's what. But the same with the education for kids. I mean, you expect them to understand completely understand the Catholic tradition by the time when is first confirmation. Communion is like what, 7 years old, 6 to 8 years old.
Yeah, see, I dropped out pretty early when I was.
I think confirmation is around 12 or 13 for kids. That's insane that you can't just expect somebody to fully understand all the mysteries of the church at such a young age. It needs to be this ongoing conversation. So it makes perfect sense to me that somebody who is a cradle Catholic would not know what the mass is about, because the education for them really stopped at a young age when they wouldn't really remember a lot of it anyway. Yeah,
I was talking to our friends again over the weekend about, and this is for Christianity in general, not just Catholicism, but Catholicism, I think, kind of set the tone for this, is, you know, a number of decades ago. They dropped the apologetic emphasis. They thought that it was aggressive or unseemly. And when we use the term apologetics, we mean giving reasons for or defense of the faith.
We're not apologizing for it.
And we're not sorry for not that you shouldn't say sorry if you've done something wrong, but that isn't what we mean by the term apologetics. And that was a real shame, because it sort of it didn't completely suppress or bury the deep, rich intellectual support for the faith, but it didn't prioritize it either. So I think, you know, as the decades went on, you know, people took a lot of things on authority, but that's it. And I always try to make this point that it's okay to take things on authority. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily wrong, but it's not necessarily enough either. You know, we take a lot of things on authority in life that we assume are correct. High-level math problems. I think we gave the example of, like, most of us take that E equals MC squared on authority. We have no idea what that means or how to prove that. But there's good evidence to believe that that's reliable. And for me, I think this is especially true in the millennial generation, where the faith was kind of passed on with almost zero apologetic emphasis, whatever. So that way, when the questions come up, well, why do you believe this, or how do you interpret this, and you don't have any good answers for it, that's when people really start to fall away from it. The good news is the tide is turning, and apologetics is making a very strong resurgence because, you know, people of various spiritual and religious affiliations face constant questioning and criticism. But they're realizing that it is a necessary tradition, and beyond anything else, there is that deep, rich intellectual history. And I know that was a holdup for you in particular, was you just didn't think that any of this stuff made sense, either Christianity in general, but even Catholicism in particular.
Yeah, when I decided to finally tell my dad that I was converting, I mean, I was sweating bullets. I'd never been so nervous to tell my parents anything in my whole life. And my mom already knew. You know, she's very open to all of this stuff, and I think she's excited now that she has somebody to talk to about all this. But my dad, I waffled for a couple of weeks. Like I was going to write him a letter. I was going to send him the book that really helped me actually in this whole process. And in the end, I just gave him a phone call. And knowing him, and actually, because we used to joke about, oh, these Christians, they don't need logic and reason. Blah. So I started off my conversation with him about, hey, actually, I looked into this. I read a bunch of books. I did a lot of studies. And it turns out believing in Christ is the most logical thing you could possibly do. Mm-hmm. And in this conversation, I think that at least made him feel a little bit more at ease in this crazy thing his daughter was doing. But he had said in that moment, his feeling was blind faith is no faith at all. Mm-hmm. Just accepting things blindly without understanding the reasons behind it. Is that really faith? Mm-hmm. You should be able to defend it.
Yeah. And that, people will say that a lot. They really equate faith with credulity or gullibility.
Yeah, you said this the other day, and I really liked it. So I'm sorry.
And
please.
This was, I think, the first Sunday school episode where I just tried to get a working definition of faith, which is really just trusting in that which you have good reason to believe. Now, I could probably run you through a whole bunch of tests, lie detectors, this or that, do some brain scans to try and figure out if you're lying when you say that you actually love me. But I think I have good reason to trust in that and believe it. So we work off of faith all the time. I have good reason to believe that if I drive to the grocery store today on the 4th of July, from the evidence that I have, that I probably won't get sucked up by a tornado. I can't prove it, absolutely, but I have good reason to believe that it's true. I have faith that I will not be wafted off to bliss eternal, at least not by a tornado on the drive to the grocery store. That's what faith should be. It should be on the far side of reason, not on the near side or the underside of it. So it's an extension of reason, not a suppression of it.
Yeah, that was an interesting. I think where did we hear that? Was that Bishop Barron? I can't remember who said that. You get all the way, you study, you do all your work as far as reason goes, and then there is that leap of faith to faith. But it's not actually a big leap once you've done all the research.
No, but it makes sense, and the Christian religion makes sense of it. If God's prerogative, if his mission really is to bring you into a loving, saving relationship with himself, it makes perfect sense that there should come a point where you need to take that leap of faith. And it's not credulity. It's not being gullible. It's not believing things without any evidence at all. It's here's where reason gets me, but I'm still going to have to take this leap and trust, right? Because trust is a part of that loving, saving relationship.
As in any relationship.
Yeah. And so it makes perfect sense, and at least in the Christian perspective. So you mentioned, and that maybe we can start to get into that now. What were some of the things, and this is you specifically now, we want your story. I've given mine a million times on this show. I give apologetic arguments on this show all the time, but I did not convert you. You converted yourself.
Yes.
You
gave me resources. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it was, I remember we had started going to a Lutheran church because that's where I felt most comfortable not being Catholic.
Anything but that.
Anything but Catholic. And I had gone to Lutheran churches over time with other friends or whatever. So I said, that feels okay. Mm-hmm. What I appreciated was, it's funny because I was criticizing the Catholic Church for its pomp and circumstance, mm-hmm. but it seemed like this very serious way of approaching worship. Yet, what I appreciate about Lutherans is that I grew up in the South, so I grew up going to Baptist stuff as well, and the evangelical worship services. Man, I just I knew I didn't want that either. There had to be some kind of seriousness to it, but for whatever reason, I thought that the Catholics were too serious. Now I know the full reasons behind all this, and it makes perfect sense. But so we wound up at the Lutheran church, and you wanted to watch the Catholicism series. Mm-hmm. And in my head, I was like, well, what's the point? We're Lutheran. We've done that without really much background research at this point. Mm-hmm. It was just more, we're going to go to church. We'll give this a try, see how we feel. I felt fine. I mean, we're worshiping God. So yeah, that's nice, mm-hmm. But people were bringing in coffee cups to mass or to service, and that felt a little weird too. So we started watching the Catholicism series at the same time. So, and then you had recommended a book to me. So my background is in anthropology and history. So I don't know if I'm sure you did, because you're very strategic. I won't say sneaky, but you're very strategic.
Say what you mean, dude.
You know how to play me. You know me. We've been together for a while. So you handed me the book, or told me to read the book, A Case for Christ by Lee Strobel. And he wound up, I think, being a Baptist pastor, right?
I think he's evangelical.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Great writer.
Yep. So my whole family, besides I come from the anthropology history background. And then my whole family on my dad's side, they're all journalists. So Pat tells me to read A Case for Christ, and I start flipping through it. And it's about Lee Strobel, who was an investigative journalist for the Chicago Tribune, I think back in the 70s. His wife converts, and they were both staunch atheists. Mm-hmm. His wife converts, and he sets out on this quest to prove that she's wrong in believing in Christ and to bring her back to atheism. Mm-hmm. And in the meantime, he converts himself.
That's right. And we watched the movie too.
We watched the movie too.
Yeah, I'm always very hesitant about faith-based movies because most of them are really hokey, right?
It wasn't.
It actually wasn't. It wasn't bad. And I thought it did a decent job with what was in,
having read the book.
In the book. Yeah. So I would definitely, if anybody's interested, that was a decent movie.
It was
for sure. Yeah. There wasn't anything. And what I liked about the movie is it was a good drama too, not to get too far aside, but it really did kind of focus on the relationship. And I guess that might be the downside, is it focused more on the relationship than it did the actual arguments.
Right.
But I mean, it's Hollywood, right?
Yeah.
So, but it definitely wasn't, it exceeded my expectations. I will say again, they were very low going into any faith.
Yeah, because the reviews weren't great on it anyway. So I think we had some lower expectations, but having read the book, it was still an interesting, it was still interesting to see it on the silver screen.
Yeah, it was well done.
Yeah.
It was well done.
So
that's recommendation number one.
Yeah, because he started off every chapter with this. You could tell by the end of the anecdote where he was going with the chapter, but it was he would bring in a story from his time as an investigative journalist, and then he would go so a little snippet of a story from his career, and then he would go into interviewing some kind of expert, psychologist, historian, and archaeologist, whatever it was.
Great kind of encyclopedia of knowledge, in a sense that he does interview some of the best philosophers and apologists, and like you said, so he interviews people. One of my favorite Protestant philosophers, William Lane Craig,
right.
Catholic Peter Kraft is in there. So even if you just were to be exposed to these people that he talks with and that he gathers the evidence for, would be an amazing resource alone. But he does a really good job compiling it in that book.
Yeah. So the reason I think I was open to all of this stuff is because I had seen, and we talked about this before, but I had seen at some point, like a year before any of this started, it said, "What if for 1 month you believed?" That kept sticking with me. It was like a video on Facebook, and I never watch videos on Facebook, but I just happened to see that snippet, and I don't even know what the rest of the video was, but it just kept sticking with me. What if you just believe for 1 month? And I was like, oh man, that is a challenge. What happens in a month if I realize this is all bogus? Well, I'll just go back to my old life. I may have lost some faith, but whatever. It's just a month. I can always go back to being a miserable atheist. So I took this and I was writing in my journal. I was like a month of faith, and I decided to write every night, what books I was reading, what I was watching, just general ideas about faith that I was having for the day. And I was using Google Docs, and I was scrolling through to see how far I got in my month of faith of journaling. And I didn't get to day 7 before I had realized that I was Christian. And I was a third of the way through A Case for Christ when I realized, because it never had been explained to me. I grew up in the South, in the Bible Belt. And, you always hear people saying, Jesus died for your sins, with a real Southern accent. Jesus died for your sins. And I'm like, I don't know what that means. What sins? What are you talking about? And then, seeing some of the stuff from I think I was also starting to read the Bible at this point. So I was reading the Old Testament and seeing, these very strict laws that God had given the Israelites on how to live, coupled with what Jesus was doing and who he was forgiving, who he was working with. And it made me realize how impactful that was. He really was this radical figure. And it wasn't just some, WWJD bracelet wearing thing. This was real. It wasn't a pop culture version of Jesus. Yeah. This was the real Jesus. And it made me realize that he wasn't who I thought he wasn't who I thought he was. And Christianity was a bigger deal than I thought. So that book really helped. I think I actually typed in, I think I was a third of the way through of that book. And I had already realized, because it said something about how we had read in our ledger, which, if you believe in the Bible, and I did at that point, oddly enough, I still believe in the authority of the Bible in some capacity.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. So
I
you
did.
weren't a Christian, but
No. I love the Old Testament for whatever reason. I could watch the Ten Commandments with Charlton Heston every year. Love it. I know. I would put more veracity with the Old Testament. I felt like more of a kinship with that over the years. But for whatever reason, maybe it's my upbringing that was slightly Christian. I always,
in a Christian environment.
I did hold an authority for the Bible, even if I didn't believe everything that was in there. So it really did. It just made me realize that there was more to the story than what I had known. So The Case for Christ by Lee Strobel.
Very popular book. A lot of people.
Very impactful for me as well.
He does a very nice job, because he does have that background in investigative journalism.
It's fun writing.
Like the most comprehensive work of apologetics ever? No, but it's a great starting point.
Yeah,
especially
absolutely.
for somebody who is genuinely curious, right? If somebody is like skepticism to level 20, like I will just fight this to the death, is it going to convert them? Yeah, probably not. You probably want
But it does give a lot of history. It took it from, because prior to that we were looking, who was we? Well, it was Zen Buddhist or something that we were listening to. And his idea was this was all just a metaphor. The apostles were a metaphor for various personalities that people can have.
That's right.
And so what I liked, so had been listening to some podcasts or audiobooks right before that about kind of like a Buddhist take on Christianity.
It's a typical thing, which you'll hear out, a lot these days, that tries to reduce Jesus or portray him as a sort of old age spiritual guru. Something like a Deepak Chopra or an Eckhart Tolle of, of his time. And I think that's what was trying to happen. And the thing about this is it's just not historically correct. That's what we call the politically correct Jesus.
Yeah.
The one who's, hey, all religions are true. Just go with whatever suits your fancy. But it's not historically correct. That Jesus was a radical figure who made radical claims that he was a son of God, that he could perform miracles, that he could cast out demons. And then this is kind of the famous C.S. Lewis argument, like either this person was who he said he was, or he was a lunatic or something worse, right? But you cannot try and paint him as some type of just another teacher among teachers.
Yeah. So I think, coming from the background of atheist, agnostic, and then not quite sure how I feel about the Bible. Is it true? Is it just myths? To the Buddhist view of Christianity, of these are just metaphors, and then finally having this very concrete explanation of, yes, Jesus was historical. All this did actually happen. So it was good for me, because I wasn't sure. I was very wishy-washy on the actual, because I thought that the Gospels had been written hundreds of years after the fact, and myths could have seeped in, and this is they couldn't have verified any of this stuff. And then A Case for Christ showed me that actually, no, the first gospel was written, not a couple decades. People were, people don't go to their deaths, like you said, for a lie. People were dying. The first Christian martyrs were dying very early on, and you don't lie. If you could get out of a lie, get out of a story so that you can live and not suffer some cruel torture, you will do that. But these people weren't.
Yeah, I think it's important. And I was getting into an argument with a professor quite recently about this, about liars not making good martyrs. And she said, well, people, die for things that they believe that aren't true all the time. I said, that's not what I'm saying. People will die for things that they believe that might not be true, but nobody dies for something that they know is a lie.
Right.
And there's a big difference there. And that's one of the things you would have to explain around the historical facts surrounding Jesus and the claims of his resurrection, of why these people were willing to be tortured and executed for something that they claim to have seen with their own eyes.
Yeah.
So,
and these are people, this wasn't happening. Eyewitnesses were still alive by the time that the Gospels were being written. And, I really, coming from that investigative journalist background, or this journalist background, and the historical background that I have from my education, having Luke he seemed like a very reliable resource for all of this. He was really interviewing people, and he took it seriously, and I didn't realize that. I didn't know, like the Book of Luke, or I didn't understand any of this stuff.
Well, I don't think most people do. I don't even think most Christians realize just how historically reliable the Gospels actually are. The New Testament.
Oh yeah, because
is.
I think in the Case for Christ, and I'm just going to kind of make up statistics on this, but the story of the Odyssey, Homer's Odyssey. I think there's only like a handful of copies that have survived since then, but there are, even at the very beginning of Christianity, in the first couple decades, there were hundreds and thousands of texts that survived from that point on. So the amount, but we look at the Odyssey and we know that it's also mythical in a lot of ways, but we trust the story of the Odyssey as written out, and we only have like one or two sources
to be reliable to the original text.
Exactly.
Yes, not the fact that it's mythical in its substance, but that this is a reliable imitation.
Sure. Yeah.
It's not a direct whatever have you. So yeah, the point is that as far as what you use to verify historical reliability,
the Testament, the Bible has it.
Not only has it, but has it to the highest degree of anything from around that time period.
And or before. Yes, absolutely.
So I think that is often makes people who are Christians very enthusiastic, but they don't often know it. I bring this up to people and I go through the different measures of historical reliability, like the amount of time between the events and when it was first recorded, which is one thing that they look at. Obviously, the more distance between when something happened and when it was recorded could lead to the development of certain myths or fabrications. So we want to look for a condensed period or as close to it. And like you said, it was done within the first recordings with the first generation of events where eyewitness testimony was still around and alive. Yeah. But the big point is, most people do not realize this.
No. So I think, like you had said, A Case for Christ isn't going to get you into a real philosophical understanding of Christianity and why it's true, but it will give you those quick hitters and really help bolster your faith so that you can go forth and look at this with more enthusiasm. I was like, whoa, I couldn't dramatically shut the book because I was reading on Kindle while I was nursing our baby to sleep, but I just look at this and be like, whoa, wow, I had no idea. And I remember turning my phone on, and this is not like very anticlimactic, but I turned my phone off, turned the Kindle off. And I just sat there for a long time in the dark. So it was when I was putting our baby to sleep in like nighttime in the winter. I just sat there in the dark for a while going, it's like, I guess I'm a Christian. Oh my God, I got to do something about this. I couldn't just sit on it and pretend like, oh, that's a nice to know thing. Because once you know it's real, you kind of have to do something about it.
You really do. So let's take that next step then. So, that was the primary. There was other things. You were reading other things, having other conversations, but you would say that was the primary thing that moved you into Christianity in general. That really helped. Yeah.
And what's kind of fun is that during this whole time when I started to explore, I was reading, I left the Bible up on this little bar thing that we have between our kitchen and our dining room. And I stand there a lot and drink coffee in the morning. So at that time, I was just, I would read a chapter or two, and I had Post-it notes, and I'd jot down questions. And we had a house guest at the time who's Jewish, and so especially because I was in the New Testament, it was fun to get to bounce questions off. And he's very devout. He's very devout to his religion, so it was cool because I was reading all this stuff about Christianity, but also as I was starting to dig into the Bible, I had somebody who is a true scholar at this. And we could have some cool conversations and he could answer some questions. And I didn't feel like I was going about this all on my own.
Yeah. All right. So let's make that move then from mere Christianity into the thing that you were even more prejudiced against.
Super prejudiced.
Catholicism. And you already hinted at what was helpful for you there. But let's
absolutely. So you're kind of in charge of our TV time. You always pick out the things.
And I'm the entertainment director.
You're the I'm the captain of the ship and you're our recreation officer.
That's right.
Yes. So you had picked out the Catholicism series, which Word on Fire and Bishop Robert Barron had done. And
by the way, I have had the CEO of that company, Father Steve, has been on this podcast numerous times and will be on again. So there is a connection there. Great, wonderful man. He's kind of the behind the scenes guy. He's the CEO. He's the executive producer, specifically of this show too. But Bishop Robert Barron is the face of it. So just wanted to mention that.
So we started watching it and on Amazon, and it really started to, I mean, Bishop Barron is such a great speaker, and he has a great way of explaining things. And then he was traveling the world and going to all these beautiful Catholic churches, or going to Jerusalem itself, and really bringing the universality of Catholicism home. And he was just explaining the Mass. And I used to I remember one time being dragged to Mass by my friend's mom on a Sunday morning after I had done a sleepover at her house. And during the liturgy of the Eucharist, the bells rang to signify the transubstantiation. And I remember whispering, "What is with the bells?" And I got shushed by her mom.
You got the hiss.
I got the hiss. I had no idea. It just sounded like, what is it? What is this? What's the point? It's just bread. It's a wafer. It's wine. And I remember being jealous. Actually, she would get up and get to have a snack, my friend. Well, I had to sit down and watch everybody do it. I just really had no idea. And the Catholicism series, in these 1 hour chunks of beautiful, it was beautifully directed, great cinematography, a very great, engaging speaker, got to introduce me to the real Catholicism, which as each episode, every time we press play on each episode, and we've watched the series, I think 3 times now, right? Because it's just so good. It really just unfolded the true beauty of Catholicism and its truth. This is the church that Christ himself founded.
Yeah, I know. So I wanted to get your perspective because, again, it was very different than mine. And I had actually, whether I told you or not, actually made up my mind quite a while before we even started watching the series. Because I took, as you know, I usually I try to take a very analytical approach to things. So, first question, okay, trying to figure out this whole religion thing, stepwise is always my approach. Does God exist? Okay, yes. If so, then what is he like? All right. Well, then is there any religion that says something crazy like God came to earth and said things and did stuff? Oh, yeah, there is. It's Christianity. All right. Is there any validity to that? Oh, apparently there is. Okay, well, there's like 45,000 denominations of Christianity. So which one of these is right? And there's actually, like 2 hinge points that really are important. And it's really either Catholicism or Protestantism. Now, there are some other things kind of mixed in there with like Eastern Orthodox. But for me, and to all my Protestant friends listening, I love you to death, but you're just not going to agree with me on this. It's just put it out there, right? But I was, trying to look at it as objectively as I could, because I had no reason to want to be a Catholic. I was like you. I was, if anything, that was like on the last of my list. But the 2 breaking points, especially from Martin Luther and the Protestant Reformation, which I always like to say is really a revolution or a rebellion. It's not a reformation. The church needed reformation. It will always need reformation, but this was a revolution. So were the doctrines of sola scriptura, right, or by scripture alone, and sola fide. And these were just complete non-starters for me. They just didn't make sense. I mean, sola scriptura was immediately by the idea that the Bible is the only authority, however you interpret it. What you don't need tradition or anybody to help you figure out how to read this, right? That to me just seemed like such a fundamental mistake for a few reasons. One, it's not even in the Bible. So the Bible doesn't say go by the Bible alone. 2 is who the heck put the Bible, especially the New Testament, together? It was the church, right? So the first church didn't even have the Bible to go off of originally. It had to put the Bible together. It's not supported in the Bible. And then just look at the effects. There's so many people who interpret the Bible. And so this is why we have 45,000 denominations of Christianity now. They can't agree on virtually anything. And a number of them have just reached what I think are just obscene conclusions, blasphemous, utterly blasphemous, if I can finally use the word blasphemy and in the appropriate context, conclusions because of this idea of sola scriptura. So that for me was the hinge point. When I started to study that and I saw just how much of a non-starter it was, it didn't sell me on Catholicism completely because I was still open to the idea that maybe none of them are right, but it at least pushed me away from Protestantism. And I said, okay, this can't be right. It's just, and I really did try and read the best defenses of it, and none of them were satisfying to me intellectually. That I'm like, all right, well, at least let me look into Catholicism. So that was kind of how it started for me. But you were kind of more opened up by the series, and specifically in understanding what everything meant in the Catholic Church.
It's kind of funny that you say about that just by going scripture alone was a turnoff for you, because for years I would look at specifically Catholicism and be like, why do I need a middleman between myself and God? I was always going off the misinterpretation of the text that says, the kingdom of God is within you. And I think it's the kingdom of God is among, right? Is Jesus among you? But I would be like, well, I have God inside of me. I don't need any middleman telling me how to worship God, blah, blah, blah. And then it turns out that, once I looked at like fundamentalists who believe that the earth really was created in 7 days, and they really are taking a very, very literal translation or interpretation of the Bible in places that aren't supposed to be literal, then I started to see why that authority is important. Authority isn't a bad thing. And that authority, especially as me, a young woman in the 21st century in this country, sounds really bad. Mm-hmm. Like, don't tell me what to do. I'm a woman. I roar, whatever. Hear me roar. Whatever they said in the 70s. But
we need authority in everything.
You do.
In any subject or learning, we need tradition and authority to learn how to. I mean, imagine trying to learn Shakespeare on your own.
I know. You can't.
You can't.
Yeah, the language is different. You don't understand all the jokes. Apparently, Shakespeare is funny. I wouldn't know that unless somebody told me.
When I first really started studying the Bible seriously, the first thing I did was try and figure out people who were good at it, right? Just like the guitar. And one of the first things I learned is, hey, the Bible is a series of books that compose a wide variety of literary genres and types. And how you interpret a book depends on where it's like a library, right? It depends where you are at in the library. Some of these are allegorical, other parts are literal history, but you need to know the difference and if you're going to get the importance out of it. Otherwise, you're prone to making some seriously critical, if not embarrassing, mistakes.
Sure.
And again, God bless, everybody who is a Christian in general. Do I think that there's issues that need to be talked about and resolved? Absolutely. But again, for me, the idea of sola scriptura was just, I could, and I tried, because again, my bias was against Catholicism. I wasn't trying to confirm Catholicism. I was against it. And I tried to make sense of this. And I made the commitment from the very start. If I was going to, become a religious person, it had to make sense all the way through.
Yep.
So that was one of the turning points for me.
Yeah. And it's funny, after watching the Catholicism series and really feeling like I had a very reasonable, logical explanation of all of this, you convinced me to go to a mass. And because you like the priest who was there. Mm-hmm. And I was like, grumbling in. And there was a huge difference at the time between the church that we had been going to, the Lutheran church, and the Catholic church that we walked into. It felt like truly a house of worship. Mm-hmm. There was something very quiet and magical about walking in. It felt like something other than attend a meeting, revival type feel or whatever. It really felt like God was residing there. And I'm not saying that in Protestant churches this isn't happening. There was a very stark difference, especially after learning the history and the reasons behind Catholicism. Mm-hmm. There was when I walked into a Catholic church again, there was a way different feeling.
And you went in with a certain understanding.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, and that changed it. And so when I think I maybe had gone to that first mass before we got to the episode on the Eucharist, mm-hmm. but we got to the episode on the Eucharist. I went to mass either that first time or again, I can't remember. And they rang the bells. And so all that time that I make fun of the bells growing up, like, what is this?
Oh, me
nonsense?
Too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
When those bells rang, my just goosebumps, just all up my body. And I was like, wow, I get it. Mm-hmm. And not that, again, and you mentioned, I think, I can't remember if it was just earlier in this one or because we just recorded another one together about, it's not, your faith shouldn't be based on a feeling.
That's
right. So I was lucky enough in that moment to have a feeling, mm-hmm. but it really is knowing where I came from, this kind of, I used to be spiritual, but not religious, or then I became atheist somewhere in there. I became very miserable and sad. Like all this is meaningless. But then I would look at my beautiful children and all the love I have for them. And I was trying to figure out how all this worked. And it just made me very sad and miserable for a while there. So coming from that and then coming to this realization that I feel like Catholicism is true, or that I'm a Christian, and then Catholicism is the truth for me. It's just, there was a very big feeling there. But because of all those previous downtrodden emotions that I was having, I do understand that I'm never going to go back to that. And even if I don't have this wonderful, miraculous feeling like I have on certain times where I've prayed the rosary, or I went to mass and really felt something when, the liturgy of the Eucharist is being performed or whatever, I'm in it.
Yeah.
I'm in it to win it. This is it. You can't ever make me go back now.
Yeah, I feel it during the Eucharist every single time, and I'm not a feelings person, so it's weird for me. And I often say, they say facts don't care about your feelings, or that. I do think that God provides special graces and feelings, especially at the beginning for a lot of people, but that you shouldn't be surprised that those feelings get taken away at some point, because again, I've heard this reiterated many times, and it makes perfect sense to me. God doesn't want you to fall in love with the feelings. He wants you to fall in love with him.
And I went through many years of just a general void, and I would rather have a feeling that there might be nothing, and how scary that is. And so now, if I happen to not have those ooey gooey feelings again, if those go away at some point, that is that if that's a dark night of the soul or whatever, or just kind of like a quiet from my those feelings of the Holy Spirit or whatever moving through me, it is infinitely better. A silence from God now would be infinitely better than the feelings of abandonment or loneliness I had without him.
Yeah. So I'm
okay with it.
Well, let's go back a little bit more to the transubstantiation in Eucharist, because I know some people, especially some Protestants, and again, I love you all, but this is worth talking about, get held up on this. But one of the experiences that was really disappointing to me at the Lutheran Church that ties into the lack of authority is we were sitting around, we were doing this pub theology, we were talking to people, and we were talking about the Christology, or the doctrine of Christ. And I was surprised at how many people there didn't subscribe to things like the virgin birth, for example. And I wasn't, an expert in Lutheranism at this time. I said, I don't know exactly what you guys are supposed to believe, but I'm pretty sure this isn't it. And if you're an atheist, I get why you don't believe in the virgin birth. I didn't believe in it when I was an atheist. But if you're a Christian, right, and you're a Christian because you accept the resurrection, God raised Jesus from the dead.
Miracle
and that's
there.
a miracle.
Yep.
It makes no sense to go back and deny the virgin birth because you think in fact, that seems like it would have to be necessary in order to understand the resurrection itself. So it was this constant dilution of doctrine, of this watering down of Christianity to a point where it wasn't even worth believing in. And is Christianity difficult to believe in? Well, that depends, right? The evidence there for it, that it's perfectly rational. You're both justified and warranted in believing in it, but you do have to believe that God raised Jesus from the dead. The religion is based on an historical miracle. That's what makes it so radical and so important. That's also why you can pull it away from other religions. So why people then go and deny things like the Eucharist make no sense to me, any more sense at least than denying that the virgin birth, right? That this would be any more likely or possible, especially since it is based in Scripture. And then for me, the biggest confirmation was looking. And this is I said, if I'm going to be any denomination, I want to believe what the earliest Christians believe. And you go back and you realize that in the earliest records we have of the church, people were being arrested in Rome for performing cannibalism.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Because they said they were literally eating the body and blood of their Savior Jesus Christ. They were being arrested for cannibalism. The earliest church fathers defending and talking about the Eucharist, when we're talking like Justin the Martyr, within the first century, they were doing this.
And even before that, how many followers did Christ lose when he said, you have to eat in my body and blood?
Yeah. Where else?
And people were super freaked out about that idea because they knew that it really was his body.
And he kept insisting on it. And where else will we go? And that was so huge for me. When I looked into that, I realized that, okay, this is what he meant. This wasn't a metaphor for Jesus. And not like Jesus didn't speak in metaphors. He often did, but he made it very clear that he was not being metaphorical in this sense. And then when you understand that, when you understand the doctrine of the real presence, transubstantiation, etc., when you really want to understand, try to understand it, then you to a much greater degree start to understand what the Mass is actually about. But if you don't understand that, then you're going to see it as like, okay, why do all these people get what is their blood sugar low? They're going up and getting a snack in the middle of it, right?
Well, so when we had decided that we weren't going to continue on with the Lutheran Church, I emailed the pastor and let both pastors let them both know that we weren't going to be continuing with them, and that we found a better home for us in Catholicism. And I had said, it was a little disappointing to us that we, we're looking for this firm conviction about Christianity and we just didn't find it. And one of the pastors wrote back and said, that's not who we are.
Yeah. Well, you wonder, and this is sad. Again, nothing like ecumenism of bringing all Christians together is an important mission. But you see this, the Pew Research, especially, that these churches, the mainline churches in particular, are just in a death spiral. I think a lot of it is because for the exact reasons that we experience, people are going there, they're looking for stability and conviction. What is truth? And too many churches are changing doctrine, watering it down, going with whatever the flow of culture is in either direction. They just go with it rather than being firm. And then you go, for me, another selling point with the Catholic Church was going through that catechism and just this is what we believe. This has never changed, and this will never change. It's written down the way it does it. This will never change. Yeah, and not only did it make sense, but that conviction and authority they put into it, regardless of how unpopular some of these doctrines are today, which they are. There was a lot of things that I've had to change personally of my beliefs since becoming a Catholic. And there's many Catholics who will backpedal their personal beliefs or politics into the religion. I think we've both made a commitment not to do that. If we're going to subscribe to this has to inform everything else. Right,
because there's a greater authority than us trying to figure this out.
That's right.
And they have figured it out.
Unpopular or otherwise. That conviction, that authority was actually very appealing to me once I saw that it made sense, of course. Sure. But then the fact that it was being taught, and it was being taught confidently, that gave me the confidence. And I think about that in any area, coaching, like you want confident coaches in anything. As soon as a coach starts being watery, you practice however you want, do things however you want. It doesn't matter. Like, come on, give me a break, right? I say all the time is like, I criticize because I care. I know what is good for you as a coach in this regard.
And the Catholic Church will still say that.
And I'm going to tell you what you need to do. And that's actually, a lot of the Catholic teaching of virtue ethics, natural law theory, et cetera, is aligning your desires with what is really good for you, what actually contributes to human flourishing. Another huge selling point to me of the Catholic Church. But anyway, I'm going on too much of a tangent.
We mentioned this a second ago, and so did Gio, about the catechism. That was another great resource, at least to understand the faith. And when I started the RCIA process, I was given a big fat book for the Catholic Catechism of, I think, North America, or for American adults or something like that. But there's also just the catechism. So which is less commentary. There's no really commentary in that, right? Yep. It's just tenets of the belief.
Here and there,
So either one, whether you're going to go for and I like the RCIA book I got has some stories about saints or just the blessed who've helped really shine a light on the Catholic faith over the last 2,000 years. So that was great to really start to understand why we believe these things, because when you start reading the Catechism, it makes perfect sense too.
And I'll just say it was funny because the philosopher, it was philosophy that first brought me out of faith and then brought me right back into it again. And the philosopher who brought me right back in was Thomas Aquinas. I knew he was a Catholic, but for so long I accepted everything that he said. I'm like, this is like Aristotle on steroids. This guy is the best philosopher to ever live. If only he wasn't a Catholic. So this is how prejudiced I was. Like I accepted everything he said, but just kind of ignored the central thing about Thomas Aquinas, which was he was really a theologian, a theologian. And he used philosophy as a tool to advance his theology. And now, of course, since having my conversion, I hold him in even higher esteem, which I wouldn't have thought possible. But he would be one of the tools, and his stuff isn't directly accessible, but there's a lot of great modern commentaries on Aquinas. There's a book called Aquinas by Ed Feser that's just exceptional, especially as an introduction that will help you.
What about the 1 minute Aquinas?
The 1 Minute Aquinas by my friend Dr. Kevin Vost, who's been on this show many times.
I read that. So I'm less philosophically inclined, and that book was one that really helped me too. Yeah,
1 Minute Aquinas by Dr. Kevin Vost, who I've had him on the show a number of times. He's just such a brain, that guy. And then Ed Feser, his book Aquinas is another great introduction. And then Scholastic Metaphysics would be a more textbook.
It sounds like a textbook.
Yeah.
It sounds like my worst nightmare, but I appreciate that you had the brain for it.
Yeah.
One last one too I wanted to dive into, because I started actually two. I had resisted the rosary, praying the rosary for quite a while, and I started doing it. I have this newish routine. It's been going on for a few months now. I wake up at 4:45 every morning. Again, we have 3 kids, so the only time I have alone time is in the morning before everybody wakes up. So I get up at 4:45. I have my coffee maker set to go off right then, so I know that there's warm or hot coffee, hot fresh coffee waiting for me. And then I get my cup of coffee. I go over to the couch with a stack of resources. It's the Bible, it's the Catechism, it's another book that whatever I'm reading at the time, and my rosary. And, I really resisted praying it at first because it seemed, just recitation, just Hail Mary, blah, blah. And, but then I started doing it myself, and I realized that every time I would say a Hail Mary or an Our Father, I would really pay attention to these words. And then on top of that, layer in all the mysteries that we're to focus on every day of the week. And my goodness, there were mornings where I would be in tears, not like just completely in awe of Jesus Christ. So, I would recommend praying the rosary, but then 2 resources that really helped me with that would be, it's just this little pamphlet. You can get it for $5 or $2.50. I think $2.50 off Amazon.
What a deal. We'll sneak an affiliate link in there.
Yeah, sure. An affiliate. Yeah. For this $2.50, we'll make 2 cents.
Half a cent.
A hay penny.
With how generous
a hay penny
is. Yeah.
But it's called How to Pray, Not Say the Rosary.
Mm-hmm.
And that was very helpful, hugely helpful as, you kind of go through these mysteries, because otherwise you might just be doing that recitation without any real feeling to it or understanding. And then I read a book, my godmother, actually the family godmother, Lisa, she was at a retreat and felt, she was in this gift shop at this Catholic retreat and felt this pull. She's like, I want to get a book for Christine. What can I get her? And she wound up getting this book called Divine Mercy for Moms. Mm-hmm. And I've been called an icy person in the past, not super compassionate. And as I was reading this book in the mornings, something unlocked. And you were kind of giggling at me because you would come downstairs, my face would be red of tears, but it was like these tears of, it wasn't a bad thing. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a bad thing. This something unlocked. And I was really drawn into this idea of Christ as being being the ultimate mercy. Mm. And so that was great. And you can couple the Divine Mercy Chaplet. There's a wonderful set of prayers with the rosary if you want, or you can use the Divine Mercy or the rosary to pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet. But there are that book, and it says Divine Mercy for Moms, but I think it would be great for anybody, really, dads, people who aren't parents, just Catholics, to really get a general overview of what Divine Mercy is and how this whole story started.
The one thing, and then we can start to. We've been going for a while here, but this is an enjoyable conversation. I must say,
we like each other.
Yeah,
like
look at that. Go figure. The one thing that I often forget to mention, which I feel I'm doing a disservice by that, is just praying too. Because I remember at the point where I had rationally made up my mind about Christianity and Catholicism, and frankly, I was kind of annoyed by it. I was like, really? This is where I'm at? So I just prayed, and I'm like, God, if you do exist and I'm right about this, then help me out here. Give me a sign. Just tell me that yes, this is where you want me to go. And then and my story is this was Christmas Eve, right? And I just felt that weird pull. Now I would attribute it to the Holy Spirit saying, go to Mass. And I snuck off.
I remember being a little annoyed that you were going off to Mass, actually. We are going to church tomorrow morning and at the other church that we go to. Why are you doing this right now?
And that was when it was just struck right through my heart.
Yeah.
And it was that act of prayer. I had made up my mind But my heart and soul and all my biases were just not there yet. Right.
Sure.
I was still very much against it, and from an emotional point of view. And then just kind of, letting that go and just praying like, okay, this is really what you're telling me is the truth. And I was never a praying person. This was like the first time I prayed, and probably since I prayed for like an Xbox when I was 8 years old. Right. So it was very awkward for me.
Yeah, sure.
But it did it. It did it for me. And that was what I think, secured my conviction. Of course, I continued to study and question and learn or this or that. But I feel, I spend so much time on the philosophical side, the apologetic side, that I sometimes overlook the practical power of prayer, which I've absolutely been convinced of as well. So I just wanted to slide that in there.
Very
from my
important.
Point of view.
Very important. It's really done a lot for me. And even small things of just fitting in. I have a timer set on my phone, an alarm that goes off at 3 p.m. every day. And it says, Jesus, I trust in you. Because 3 p.m. is the time that Jesus had been crucified and died. And just that reminder. Mm-hmm. It's just little quick hitters of prayer. And you realize that you're having these conversations in your head anyway throughout the day. You might as well direct them towards something purposeful and good.
Yeah. So let me finish with this, and maybe we could just share a little bit. And I've talked about this before, so I'll just give my brief answer again and then let you go on it of how your life, not just ours or our family, but you can dig on that, has changed since becoming a Christian and Catholic. Hey, apologies for the little cutoff there. My wife got so excited to tell her final part of the story that she had to use the restroom.
You've been talking for too long.
I know.
I have to go to the bathroom.
I know. Okay, so real quick, the final question here to wrap this up is, how has this changed your life?
Are you going first?
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, go ahead.
I've given this spiel a number of times.
Well,
one of my favorite questions somebody asked me on this. It was Jason Leenertz on his podcast. He asked me if becoming a Christian made my life easier. And I said absolutely not. But I really meant in some ways yes, in other ways no. Christianity and Catholicism in particular answered the biggest, most important questions in my life, not just sufficiently, but magnificently. Origin, meaning, morality, and destiny. It was able to give me both the philosophical and spiritual foundation that I needed to feel like I had come home. That life, that the value and meaning that we all sense in life is objective. It's grounded. It's there. So that foundation is infinitely valuable, infinitely precious. And so in that sense, yeah, my life has become a lot better and more meaningful and I guess easier, but it hasn't been easier because what Christianity and Catholicism does is it sets a high bar. It really does. But the high bar isn't about a set of restrictions or rules. It's not arbitrary. It's about developing a loving, saving relationship with God. And the more you develop the relationship with God, the more you want to follow God's will. And the more you want to follow God's will, the more you want to do the things that are really good for you and really good for others. I think I've always had a sort of soft, compassionate heart, but I was also a very selfish person for most of my life. And since becoming a Christian, all of that has really started to change. And not just because I feel like I have to, but because I feel like I genuinely want to. It has given me a perspective on life and on humanity. Again, I don't think I was a bad person before. And I definitely don't want to imply that if you're not a Christian, you are a bad person, or that if you become a Christian, you'll automatically become a good person. This is just my experience. But it enabled me to become a better person in many different ways. At least I think you can
No, you are. I think you are a better husband and father.
Put in your 2 cents because of this, and just see things, because when you view things through the Christian perspective, you realize that we were put here for a reason. What is this reason? Is it to develop? Is it to make the most amount of money or to have the most things? Absolutely not. Those things become immediately arbitrary, right? And you start to reorient your life toward what the greatest and final good ultimately is. And that's changed everything for me, but it's also made things a lot more difficult. But at the same time, it gives you that foundation to shoulder the burdens that you will move through on the spiritual life. So I will leave it there, and I can give the rest of my story another time. But for you, how have things changed?
You say that Christianity has made your life better, but not easier. I would say it's made my life easier and also better because you have always had a soft, compassionate heart. Yet somewhere, and I don't really remember where this happened because I wasn't always like this, but I think I became more, what's the word I'm looking for?
You said icy before.
Yeah, icy, and then just very skeptical of everything. Even nice feelings. I'm like, why am I feeling like this? I just became a very downtrodden, negative person over time. Mm-hmm. And it seemed to me that Christianity did something to me that made me, you put up walls, and I had all this warm, wonderful feelings for the people I really loved the most. Yet there was a big wall that impenetrable. Nobody else could get in there. I wasn't letting any love out. This is it. If you were in my circle, you were in. Now, I'm very loyal. That's it. You're in there. We're good. I'll always love you. And always, take care. I think I have a very nurturing nature, but at the same time, just lack compassion. And I just was so skeptical about any kind of lovey feelings toward anybody. It would make me feel very uncomfortable. And then suddenly I read about Christ, and it wasn't, his parables are great. His teachings were great, but also just the things that he did. And so many things that were left explicitly unsaid in the Bible, yet somehow they managed to break down any wall I had in my heart. So it has made it easier. It seems like I got so used to saying no or being negative or not wanting to give my time or energy towards other people that suddenly to have Christ just come in and just break down all those walls. And now suddenly I can be a Christian. I'm a nice person. I love everyone. I'm saying this and I'm waving my arms around. I love everyone. It made it easier because it seemed like I was fighting and fighting and fighting. I wanted to be a nice, loving person, but I had been one way for so long that without this very dramatic, radical change in my life, it would have taken years to break those walls down, or they might have gotten bigger. I'm not sure. Pushed more people out and kept the few close ones because I'm more of an introverted person anyway. So it just seemed natural if I derive energy by being alone, then I would feel my best by only giving my love or energy to a few.
Yeah.
And so I was very judgmental. My mom, anybody would say like, wow, you are tough. And be like, well, too bad. And well, they decided to do that on their own day. Well, they'll just figure it out. And now it's very different. People that I would have just kind of like been very indifferent. And we just talked about this the other day, and I put on my Instagram that the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. And I was absolutely indifferent to the vast majority of people in the world. People I knew I was indifferent towards. My family, I'd be like, they'll figure it out. And whatever happened, Christianity has made me so not indifferent.
Well,
which is weird. It is weird when I find myself caring genuinely for people I don't know and people I do know that I've already pushed away previously. Mm-hmm. I suddenly want to bring them back into the fold and help them. And this is so weird.
Yeah. I mean, to say that everything has changed is the understatement of at least our entire lives, I think. And it's just those two commandments of Jesus, love God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. And the Greek word is agape, love, of willing the good of the other. The English language is somewhat insufficient in this regard because there's so many ways that we think about love, but love is ultimately willing the good of the other for other. It is a very sacrificial, altruistic type of love. But it's not, true altruism in the sense that what is good for you, what will fulfill your own happiness, is acting out of this sort of love. It works both ways. And I found that to be absolutely true. It's difficult at first, especially if you've been in a mode that is extremely self-serving, to reorient yourself. But as you get used to that, you realize, oh my goodness, there is tremendous fulfillment in these acts of love. So for both us, I know for our relationship, it has changed everything.
For parenting, absolutely.
For parenting.
I think it helps too because with parenting, I have a role model. I have something to try to aspire to. And I also have a God who will listen to my troubles and I can give my troubles to him. There can be kind of this redemptive suffering as well. Makes the days go by even better. And also to realize that my children, though they are younger than me, are they're on this journey as well. So we are not, I have knowledge to impart on them. They have some cool new buoyant energy and ideas to impart on me, but we're really all journeying on this together. And it's made, parenting more joyful.
So
well.
let's finish up with this, because you're doing some interesting and fun things. You have been inspired to evangelize yourself, to share your story and specifically focus on parenting. You have since started the Catholic Mama blog and podcast. So what's going on over there?
Yeah. So I was sitting on the couch one night after everybody had gone to bed. One of the rare nights, because I always have my alone time in the mornings, but it was a rare night where I was sitting on the couch alone, and I was kind of in flux what I was going to do. I felt like I wanted to blog, but I felt that this was important. Things have been changing with me, and it seemed like then the little bits of chatting that I'd done in, the Catholic youth groups that we had kind of gone in with or whatever, that my story seemed to be interesting to people. So I wanted to share it, and the Catholic Mama just popped into my head, and I went and looked, and the website was available. So I bought it. And the idea is, raising our kids confidently Catholic, because it seems like there are a lot of timid Catholics, a lot of lukewarm Catholics. And I didn't want to, not condemn, but I didn't want to relinquish my children to this Catholic lifestyle where they might also feel like that. And in the same way, I'd like to evangelize, this kind of proud, exciting, joyful Catholicism to others. So, blogging there, some of it's very practical stuff about raising kids, like gross motor skills, or, cooking with your kids, things, homeschooling your kids, because we do a little bit of that now that the kids are getting older, to exploring faith. I have our conversion stories are on there, just various explorations of faith, talking about the rosary, how to pray. And then also doing the podcast as well, to try to
which I've been a guest on.
Yeah, several times.
Thank
yes.
you. I was absolutely honored.
I do enjoy talking about this. So it's kind of funny. Before all of this religion stuff happened to us, Pat and I had a great relationship anyway. We managed to survive having 3 kids in less than 4 years. And, but I got to say, all of this has really just infused our relationship with something so fun and beautiful. And so it's a lot of fun to get to talk to you about this stuff as well.
Thank you for coming on my show. So let me give you a shameless plug.
Okay.
The Catholic Mama, thecatholicmama.com, MAMA for thecatholicmama.com.
Oh, that's right. People spell mama ways.
MOMMA.
No, MAMA. That's the only way to spell mama.
And you have a beautiful little ebook, which I did help contribute to a little bit.
Yes, because on the more philosophically heavy.
And it's how to talk to your kids about God, because kids ask the best. I've said this before on my podcast. Kids ask the best philosophical questions, but also the best theological questions, right? So we took a lot of fun questions that our kids would constantly ask us about God and tried to answer them as best as we can, in a way that was philosophically consistent and made sense, but also accessible to kids. Yeah, and turned it into a free ebook.
Yeah. So on the ebook, again, it's completely free. What I wanted to do was arm whoever was going to be answering the questions. I wanted to arm that person with a deeper understanding of for the answer, but also provide then a kid-friendly answer. And this is not talking down to kids. I'm absolutely against talking down to kids, but I do think it's important to have it accessible depending on the level. So, have the kind of the grown up, or better, lack of a better word, a grown up version of the answer, the kid friendly version, and then also some helpful resources.
And these are really good questions. Like, why did God make bad guys? Who made God? Like, all very deep, good philosophical questions.
And the kids are asking them. It's great.
So check it out, folks. Obviously, it's my wife. I love her dearly, so I'm always going to recommend her stuff. But she has a tremendous background in writing. I mean, she's the one that really makes any of my stuff decent.
I am the editor. I'm also, I was an anthropology major, religions studies minor in college.
Right. Yeah.
I did, oddly enough, for the downtrodden atheist, I did think religion was interesting always.
It's certainly interesting. It also happens to be true. So thecatholicmama.com, check it out. The How to Talk to Your Kids About God. We'll link to that. We'll link to your podcast. I hope you invite me back on again soon.
I'm going to force you.
It's my favorite podcast.
We live together. So, you have to do what I say.
and thank you for, hopefully people have enjoyed this
Long talk.
If nothing else, again, if you would have told me even just a year ago, as we were starting to first consider becoming Christian, 2 years ago, if you would have told me that I would have become a Christian, I'm sure you too, I would have gone to bed with a petrified diaphragm from all the hours of hysterical belly laughing from such a preposterous suggestion. And then I would have literally died if you would have said that I would have become a Catholic. Yet here we are. So
super Catholics.
Super Catholics on steroids, right?
Not Catholics. Catholics.
Yeah, watch out for those hashtags on Instagram.
Yeah, hashtag Catholic is actually Catholic, and I was wondering why people were posting religious cats, but they're just cats. Yeah.
So this was our story. We're sharing it, and again, I want to include everybody in this conversation, whether you're religious or not, whether you're Catholic or not. These were the paths that we took, and that we found literally changed everything about our lives, our relationship, the meaning, the orientation that we took. So thanks for tuning in. If you found this helpful or interesting, please do check out thecatholicmama.com. She's doing wonderful work over there on Instagram. We'll provide all the links in the show notes. We'll also link all the resources that we talked about, which are just fantastic. So head over to chroniclesofstrength.com. Check out the show notes page for all the links over there. Thanks, folks.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.